Pyro is in a really good spot having access to Ben and some other good carries. Hydro is the best element in the game currently, having some of the best characters and best reactions. Electro enables some of the best reaction teams in the game with its interesting properties. Cryo is kind of in a rough spot, but has some really strong damage dealers and freeze. Onimo is an amazing supporting element with top tier units, Swirl and Viridescent Werner. Dendra was added recently but has drastically shaken the meta with its reaction comps. And then Geo... yeah, let's talk about it. Hello there, Flip here, and today we're going to be talking about Geo, and why I think as of now the element is doomed, and unless it gets reworked entirely I see no hope of it getting any better, and I doubt even future characters from here can save the element. Geo from a meta and just general use standpoint is the most flawed element in the game and has no real identity, so let's discuss it. And before we do that, hello Genshin players, have you ever wanted more gacha? For your gacha? Well, in that case, I'm here to proudly announce the sponsor of today's video, Genshin Box, which is a free third-party Genshin site where you can work towards winning a lot of items like welcome wounds and Genesis crystals, as well as test your luck in their various different Genshin boxes. They even have a very cute Focalors one here. Every day you're going to be able to open a free box that nets you some rewards. And to get you into this spooky season, if you save up enough from daily rolls, you're going to be able to roll on this shiny new Halloween box, which contains pumpkins that can be crafted into Genesis crystals. And the more varying types of pumpkins you're able to collect, the more valuable items you're able to craft. For example, combining 4 types of pumpkins gives you 9,170 crystals, which you can redeem in Genshin. And that's not all, because they host giveaways that are free for everyone to enter on the site. You can look at all the positive reviews with people giving feedback and just overall loving Genshin Box. So make sure to go to the description below to check out for yourself, and once again thank you Genshin Box for sponsoring the video. Now back to it. To kick things off, we have to set parameters for what makes an element good in the first place. Elements in Genshin are comprised of 3 things: the resonance, the characters, and the reactions. Good elements usually cover at least 2 of these bases very well, and the combination of these 3 things is what makes an element's identity, as they usually tie into each other. Let's look at Hydra for example. After the buff, the resonance is insanely strong for some of the Hydra characters, as most of them scale with HP, which all popular double Hydra teams will use, so a pretty strong resonance. For the characters, Xingqiu and Yelan are meta defining, and then you have amazing on-field units like Neuvillette and Childe, with good supports like Kokomi and Nilou. And lastly, the reactions, also top tier. Bloom, Vaporize, Electrocharged, Freeze. Hydro has literally no bad reactions and all tie into a top meta team some way or another. And that was me skimming over Hydra's merits. Let's look at the aspects of Geo in more detail and why I think it's hopeless. Geo Resonance is actually pretty strong in comparison to the other Resonance. It does have its issues though, mainly due to the fact that it doesn't work off fields like both Pyro and Hydra Resonance do. And if you don't have a dedicated shielder, you may run into uptime issues. Though you're mostly using Zhongli with Geo Resonance and playing Mono Geo, so this may not be that much of a problem for where you would actually be using Geo Resonance. So overall, Geo Resonance is good and promotes the use of a shielder and works best in Mono Geo teams for the Geo Res Shred. Good. Now for the characters. Going by release order, at 1.0 we had Noelle, Ningguang, and Geo Traveler. In all-star roster for sure. Back in 1.0, all these characters were quite competent. Ningguang and Noelle with Constellations were actually really good carries, mostly due to the fact that the average team power level was so low. Nowadays though, Geo Traveler is never played besides meme comps. Noelle is fine, and Ningguang's power level as a carry is very low, on top of her being clunky, and as a support she's very outclassed. And this trend follows most Geo characters. Albedo, solid on release, being played in the double Geo role, now never used due to better options existing. Itto and Goro for Mono Geo, but Mono Geo, spoiler alert, is not that great. Yunjin is then actually very solid, but her use cases are sparse and literally has nothing to do with Geo, as she just supports Yoimiya and Wanderer. And then there's Zhongli, who was bad on release, got buffed, and was the best as your shielder role. But as time has gone on, we have better defensive options for specific scenarios, so when you can just use a shielder specialized for a certain role, Zhongli loses his value and just becomes a comfort pick, who is not really best anywhere, except for a team like Mono Geo. So even Zhongli, who is currently the strongest Geo character, is generally pretty mediocre overall. Then to a certain point you have to ask, why is this the case, and why are the Geo characters so easily phased out? Well, let's look at the last part of what makes an element. The reactions. Geo has run reaction like Onimo, and that reaction is Crystallize, which gives you a shield that scales with EM. And that shield is very weak and serves no real use. Could remove Crystallize from Geo and it'd probably make the element better honestly. On a team like Double Geo Huta, what would happen sometimes is that since you have Geo application from Zhongli and Albedo, you might just rob the Hydra aura and cause Huta to miss a vape. So if Albedo and Zhongli just applied no Geo at all, it would make the team better. The main problem with Crystallize is that it's just counterintuitive to Geo as a whole. People say Geo is supposed to act as a standalone element, but that isn't the case, as if you play mono Geo teams, you are going to be using Zhongli, which offers a much stronger shield anyways, and you literally won't be able to pro-crystallize. Then for reaction teams, the Geo character has to be the trigger, but Crystallize scales with EM, which no Geo character builds, and it's not like you apply a Geo aura to an enemy, so another character can't trigger a Crystallize shield for you. The only use case you have for the reaction is Archaic Petra, which is honestly a good set but very awkward to use, because of the one element at a time limit. What I'm guessing was Hoyo's intention was to make Viridescent and Archaic Petra as opposites to each other. So like you bring Onamo units for VV, you'd bring Geo for the Archaic Petra buffs, but Swirl is able to shred multiple resistances, and shreds are far rarer, leading to Crystallize and Archaic Petra just falling behind. Not even highlighting how Swirl has good AoE damage, and the character scale with EM unlike Geo characters, which leads to the biggest problem of Geo just having no real identity in the game. If I were to ask you what the point of Geo was and how it's intended to be used, what answer would you give me? Because of all the things I can think of, Geo literally contradicts itself. You can't say Geo was made to be a standalone element, as Crystallize and Archaic Petra counteract this. It also can't be the defense element, as the Orcon doesn't scale with defense, nor is it in the Resonance. What I think Geo was supposed to be in earlier stages of the game was the shielding element, but even then, we have so many shielders that Geo doesn't have a monopoly on defensive utility through shielding. Let's look at Onamo again. Almost every Onamo character has a form of crowd control in their kit, and this is something unique to Onamo, so it has a monopoly over crowd control. So even outside of Swirl and VV, you bring Onamo when you want crowd control. With Geo, do you want defensive utility? Okay, bring literally any other shielder, and not only will they have enough shielding most of the time, but they will also work better as they're able to apply an element that actually does something. Onamo can work as an element with only one reaction because through swirling you apply and spread more elements, where with Geo you take away the element for nothing in return. I just realized as I'm writing the script too that shields in general don't even stack, so stacking a ton of crystallized shields don't do anything for you. This element is... Let's just talk about Mono Geo more. Goro and Ito released in 2.3, in which Goro promoted the use of having 3 Geo units in the team, in which the best synergistic core would be just using Zhongli and Albedo together, as Zhongli and Geo Resonance, which Albedo snapshotted, would boost his damage over using other off-field damage dealers. And Albedo also really helped with the energy requirements. At the time, Mono Geo had a pretty solid power level while also being so easy to play, making it one of the top tier teams at the time. So what happened to Mono Geo? It kind of just stayed the same. Shenhe came out raising the power of all cryo teams by a decent margin, and Yunjin raised Yoimiya's viability and did nothing for Mono Geo. 2.5 and 2.6 Ayato and Yai came out, which we'll touch on later. 2.7 Yelan came out raising the ceiling of a lot of vape teams and giving way to the double Hydro core, which is one of the strongest and most flexible team cores in the game, which Ito couldn't take advantage of as he does mostly charge attacks. You also got Kuki, who was okay to use on G3O, but was worse than Mono Geo. 2.8 we got Heizo, who meh. And then in 3.0 we have Dendra that buffed Hydro and Electro by a large margin, and some niche characters. Suddenly Ayato and Yai were a lot better, as Yai can be run in aggravate teams, and Ayato was really good on Bloom teams. Kuki can utilize Hyper Bloom so it never wants to be used with Ito, and so on and so on. 3.1 had Sino and Nilou, and then in 3.2, Nahida dropped, immediately making Dendra one of the best elements in the game, and Nilou Bloom was another AoE team that was completely brain dead to play. Now for the nail in the coffin, we get to 3.3 when Wanderer comes out, and guess what 4-star also does? Farazan, who blows Goro out of the fucking water as a buffer, and doesn't have that weird element required that Goro does. So Zhao and Wanderer hypercarry cores are a lot more flexible, and stronger than Mono Geo teams, with none of the downsides. So if they were just going to release Farazan, what was the point of restricting Geo to Mono Geo teams in the first place? If they just then decided to do nothing with it, Eula has received more buffs through Shenhe, Mika, and Beacon than Mono Geo has in the same time span. Mono Onamo teams are also stronger than Mono Geo teams. You know, Onamo, the same element that is able to easily interact with the other elements. So again, what is Geo's identity that doesn't contradict itself? At this stage in the game, even if they release Navia, and she's somehow a broken Geo character, great, she is a good unit, but the rest of Geo still won't be used. To the point I think the element as a whole just needs a rework. I think Crystallize can stay, but like with Freeze, let's just have EM not affect Crystallized shields at all, and just give the shields a solid base HP. For convenience, crystallized shards should also just try and hover towards you so you don't have to chase them. They should also be able to stack, so having more of them is a benefit, and someone like Albedo can be enough as your only form of defensive utility. And like with how strong Viridescent is, let Archaic Petra increase the strength of crystallized shields, and also give you the damage buff depending on what crystallized shields you picked up. But this isn't restricted to the first shard you picked up, so you can have multiple at a time, but this buff should only last as long as the shields do. Geo Resonance is fine and the construct limit should be increased or just taken away, and with that, Geo would be in a much better state than it is now. As for Mono Geo teams, Goro just needs a buff which they aren't going to do, so either make a character that can replace Albedo or Zhongli in the team. Without a rework, what I fear is that the next Geo character, Navia, is either going to be painfully mid, or she's going to be so overtuned to the point where it has nothing to do with Geo and just her own individual strength, which is the same thing that has been practically carrying Zhongli, and he still isn't viewed in the highest of lights. And with that, no more yapping needed. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on Geo, as I'd love to hear and respond to almost every single comment. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Peace.